The Wooddale Boys and the Dangerous Truth About Empty Rifles. A twisted history tale from the Kansas frontier. Before we begin today's twisted history adventure, do me a favor. Give this video a thumbs up, hit that like button, and subscribe to the channel. It helps keep these strange Old West stories riding across the prairie instead of getting lost somewhere between history books and bad campfire storytelling. Now, let's travel back to the Kansas frontier of the late 1860s, a time when men trusted horses more than banks, coffee counted as medicine, and nobody checked whether a rifle was actually loaded. This story takes place near the dusty settlement of Wooddale, Kansas, a town so small it had one street, 2 arguments, and 3 men claiming to be sheriff. Out there rode a group known as the Wooddale Boys. They weren't famous outlaws, they weren't lawmen. They were something far more dangerous, confident men with questionable planning skills. The Wooddale Boys consisted of Big Eli Harper, who believed every problem could be solved loudly; Silas Boone, who claimed to be an expert marksman despite never hitting anything smaller than a barn; and Doc Miller, who wasn't a doctor but once owned a medical book missing several important pages. Together, they formed what they proudly called a Frontier Protection Association. Everyone else called them "those fellas again." Now life on the Kansas frontier was tense. Cattle drives passed through. Travelers moved west. Rumors traveled faster than horses. Bandits existed, sure, but mostly people were just trying not to starve or accidentally sit on a rattlesnake.
One evening at the Wooddale Saloon, a traveler burst through the doors shouting that dangerous rustlers were heading toward town.
The piano stopped. Cards froze mid-deal. Someone dropped a biscuit in fear, and the Wooddale Boys stood up dramatically, mostly because they had been waiting years for something exciting to happen. Big Eli slammed his hand on the table.
"Boys, this town needs heroes."
No one volunteered to disagree. Within minutes, the Wooddale Boys armed themselves. Rifles were grabbed, ammunition belts were thrown over shoulders, hats were tilted at heroic angles. The Wooddale Boys rode into the night under a full Kansas moon, convinced they were about to save civilization itself. They spotted movement near a line of cottonwood trees, silhouettes, horses, figures moving slowly.
"Halt in the name of Wooddale?"
The figures stopped. Silas Boone dramatically pulled his trigger. Nothing happened. He tried again. Still nothing. Silas examined his rifle as if betrayal had occurred. Meanwhile, Doc Miller attempted to fire his weapon and discovered it contained no ammunition whatsoever, only a folded grocery list from 3 months earlier. The supposed rustlers turned out to be a group of confused settlers driving cattle north. They stared at the Wooddale Boys, 3 armed men aggressively pointing completely empty rifles.
"You boys planning to scare us or just organize a parade?"
The embarrassment was immediate.
"We were testing you."
Testing them. Yes, a tactical evaluation involving unloaded weapons. The settlers nodded politely, the way people do when deciding not to argue with enthusiastic fools. News of the incident spread across Kansas faster than a prairie fire in dry grass. Soon, every nearby town knew about the Wooddale Boys, the only frontier defenders brave enough to confront danger armed entirely with confidence. But the lesson had not yet fully arrived. Weeks later, rumors surfaced again, this time about actual bandits robbing supply wagons. Determined to redeem themselves, the Wooddale Boys prepared carefully. They cleaned their rifles, polished their boots, practiced heroic poses, and once again, forgot to check the ammunition. History repeated itself spectacularly. When they confronted suspicious riders along the trail, Big Eli gave another dramatic command. The riders immediately surrendered, because they believed the rifles were loaded. The Wooddale Boys accidentally captured real criminals using empty guns. Word spread even farther now. Some called them geniuses. Others called them lucky. One newspaper described them as strategically unpredictable. The truth was simpler. Fear often works faster than bullets. From that day forward, the Wooddale Boys became local legends. Bandits avoided the area entirely, unsure whether these men were brilliant tacticians or dangerously incompetent. Probably both. And here lies the twisted history lesson of the Kansas frontier. Sometimes power comes not from weapons, but from confidence. Sometimes reputation travels farther than truth, and sometimes the most dangerous weapon in the Old West wasn't a loaded rifle. It was a man who didn't realize his rifle was empty. The Wooddale Boys never became famous in official history books. No statues were built, no grand monuments marked their victories. But around Kansas campfires, old-timers would laugh and repeat the warning passed down for generations. Always check your rifle, because in the Old West, an empty gun could either get you killed or accidentally make you a legend. And that, friends, is Twisted History. If you enjoyed riding along with the Wooddale Boys today, give this video a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and come back next week for more twisted tales from the strange side of the Old West. Thank you for watching, truly. And remember, history isn't just written by the winners. Sometimes it's written by the folks who forgot the bullets. Just when the Wooddale Boys thought their reputation had finally settled into respectable legend status, winter arrived on the Kansas frontier. Winter had a way of testing even the bravest men, especially the poorly prepared ones. Snow rolled across the prairie in long white waves. Wind rattled cabin doors. Horses looked personally offended by the weather, and Wooddale itself slowed to the pace of frozen molasses. Now, most sensible townsfolk prepared carefully for winter travel. Not the Wooddale Boys. Big Eli announced they would begin official winter patrols, despite nobody asking for winter patrols, and everyone else preferring warm stoves. The plan sounded heroic. Ride the outskirts of town, watch for trouble, protect Wooddale from mysterious winter dangers. The real danger, of course, turned out to be common sense. One icy morning, the boys spotted tracks outside town. Deep impressions in fresh snow leading toward the abandoned mill. Silas Boone squinted dramatically. "Outlaws," Doc Miller nodded wisely, mostly because nodding made him look knowledgeable. They followed the tracks cautiously, rifles ready, once again completely forgetting to confirm whether they were loaded. The trail ended behind the mill where a large shadow moved slowly through the fog. "Come out with your hands up." The shadow stepped forward and revealed itself to be Mrs. Abernathy's milk cow wearing a blanket. The cow stared at them with calm disappointment. The Wooddale Boys stared back. Well, she looked suspicious. From that day forward, the townspeople claimed the Wooddale Boys successfully prevented the Great Milk Cow Incident of 1871, a threat nobody knew existed until it was heroically resolved. But something interesting happened after all these misadventures. Travelers passing through Wooddale began spreading stories about a town protected by fearless riders who confronted danger without hesitation. Bandits avoided the area entirely. Outlaws chose easier targets. Whether by luck, reputation, or sheer confusion, the Wooddale Boys had accomplished what many real lawmen never could. They made trouble think twice. And maybe that's the most twisted lesson of all. The Old West wasn't always won by the fastest gun or the sharpest mind. Sometimes history favored the loudest confidence, the biggest storytelling, and a group of determined men too stubborn to realize they were accidentally successful. Years later, when railroads came and towns grew civilized, old settlers sat outside general stores telling stories about the early days. Someone would always ask, were the Wooddale Boys real heroes? And the answer was always the same. Well, nobody ever got shot. The town stayed safe, and they sure made life interesting. Which, honestly, might be the highest achievement anyone ever reached on the Kansas frontier. If this winter tale gave you a grin, tip your hat our way. Hit like, subscribe, ring that bell. So these twisted frontier stories keep writing. Drop a comment with your favorite Old West mishap. Share this with a friend who forgets the bullets but never the confidence. Stay warm out there, partners. We'll see you on the next ride.